Excellent. So a couple of the items that I'm going to be talking about today, I got 2 items that are going to be covering the sales premium features, as well as 1 item that's kind of going to be referencing Dynamics collaboration. So sales premium has kind of traditionally been in kind of an interesting spot where the sales enterprise license is generally the best bang for the buck as far as meeting the needs of current state users as well as future proofing, just by way of the additional Power Automate, licensing and power that they get, as well as their ability to kind of embed Canvas apps and leverage Canvas apps. So, but there are some interesting features coming out for that sales premium license that I wanted to talk about because these things do come up with current customers. And I do see a couple interesting use cases for how we could leverage these additional features as well. So one of them is going to be related to the seller dashboard. So this is going to be a new feature. Public previews coming out in October, and looks like general availability is in December. And so what this is if you have a sales premium license, this dashboard is accessible from the work list that you would be presented in your Sales Hub. And it essentially does some interesting aggregates across contact points, activities, and being able to kind of report on those activity numbers. So we do have customers, and when we talk to prospective customers, there are companies that track and report on sales representative performance, not so much just by the close percentage or size of the deal, so on and so forth, but they also track just the activities that the sales representatives are doing and performing. So this would be a good way to easily be able to monitor and see the activities, not only from a management perspective, but from an individual like sales representative perspective. And one thing really interesting to call out here, because this has been coming up, is that depending on how your organization is engaged with sales and how you farm and hunt, this dashboard does take into consideration LinkedIn activities. So activities that you're performing on LinkedIn can be tracked here. So that is something very notable, because as as sales is evolving in this day and age, the importance of LinkedIn is kind of growing, and being able to track those LinkedIn activities is huge, and especially be able to track them in an out-of-the-box capacity. So it's some use cases for sales premium licensed users would be not every sales representative would need this kind of license, is kind of how I see it. But inside sales, this is a great opportunity for them, especially here at JourneyTEAM. When I walk by the inside sales team, they're constantly in LinkedIn. So I think that this could be a good opportunity for inside sales reps, or a slice of your sales team that could really benefit from some of these sales premium features. So that's the seller dashboard. And kind of like I said, is public preview is in October this year. I try to choose features that are in public preview or early access this quarter, because there are a lot of really cool features that are going to be in availability and preview kind of going into later in Q4 this year and Q1. So next up, this feature is kind of related to some of the additional collaboration features. This is related to how Microsoft is engaging with how O365 work, how Dynamics works, Power Apps, and as well as Teams from a collaboration standpoint. So this feature is kind of going to be related to you can be engaged in dealing with live data from Dynamics in emails, in Teams, and you can update that data, and it can be reflected in CRM. So it kind of just it's no longer living in silos, but how everything works together. So how you access this, I jumped the gun a little bit, but you'd use the @Dynamics symbol. And if you have this feature enabled, you'd be able to do this from within your Teams or Outlook. And it would then be able to, you'd be able to do a query and look for data from within Dynamics. So it's very similar to how Viva works, for those that are familiar with Viva, and even the upcoming Viva sales implementation. So pretty cool. And the next slide, now that I led us here, is that you can kind of see how this would look from within a Teams environment. So you could do the @Dynamics, and you could find that record, and you could view those details of that record. It'll do a modal pop-up, and you can edit and update that information, and you don't need to go back into Dynamics to do it. So from a collaboration standpoint, you can share records, you can interact with those records and collaborate on them, and you don't have to go navigate to different places to kind of break up whatever you were doing in that focus time. And this last feature, kind of jumping into enhanced sequence creation. So this one's kind of new. It's supposed to be in public preview this month, or excuse me, early access this month. I don't see it in our environment, so depending on those of you that have the Sales Premium license, you may or may not be able to see and start playing around with this feature. But the whole idea is that you can create, as a seller or account representative or sales representative, is that you can create essentially tasks and automations yourself and kind of track those activities against a specific end goal. So kind of ambiguous, but really what it comes down to is that there's a difference between playbooks and these sequence creation. And how I have viewed it is playbooks are more of like, that's going to be able to create a checklist item for you to reference. Hey, I have this lead is of this type of industry. Here's my playbook for that lead, and here's some of my steps. The difference between this and sequence is that the idea is that you are creating activities and actual action items, right? Like you're creating phone calls, you're creating tasks, you're creating appointments. Not that these things aren't items that we can automate in, behind the scenes anyways, based on the type of lead it is. Use some Power Automate automation to generate these tasks and the list of activities. But this is an out-of-the-box way to be able to do that, and you can even kind of be able to view and identify kind of where people are at against all these activities. So it's a slightly different view as far as, hey, I'm working this lead to order process. I'm using my business process flow, and I know what stage my opportunities are in. This is a little bit different, where this is managing the activities against that opportunity. So instead of like, a lot of people have lots of data points in the business process flow where, hey, I need to go check pricing with accounting or something like that, right? Where it's a to-do item where you could use the sequence, instead of it just being a data point, it could be an activity that you're tracking against that. So essentially, it's trying to enforce a process amongst your sales team, sellers, account managers, and so that they're not skipping steps. And you can also track to see who is skipping steps as well, and the percentage complete of that specific sequence. So I'm looking forward to playing around with sequences a little bit more. There currently is the sequence if you have a Sales Premium, you can create sequences right now. And this is the enhanced sequence creation portion of it. So kind of looking forward to kind of seeing how this can improve in the use cases that'll kind of come from it. So those are some of the big things for Dynamics and with the enhanced sequence creation. And this last slide is just kind of, these are different Dynamics modules. And what I wanted to do too is talk about one other thing. I don't specifically have a slide for it, but I'm sure most admins in Dynamics platforms are getting the notifications as far as deprecated features. But it is a good call out that automatic record creation rules, the old version of these rules, so not in the unified interface, but in the old interface that are tied to what looks like the old workflow interface, those are being deprecated, and that deprecation date is coming soon. It's in October. So if you have automatic record creation rules, those will need to be migrated, and there's a migration utility to do that, to transition those to the unified interface, and so that you're using Power Automate in the back end. So just something to keep in mind, because I would hate for anybody to have any of those behind the scenes and then they get turned off, and then you lose whatever, email creation or case creation based on emails, so on and so forth. And that is it for Dynamics.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So just a couple updates on Microsoft Viva. Of course, within the past year, so Microsoft has been releasing several modules in Viva. So you're probably familiar with Insights or Learning. And so just a couple modules that are being released. Brandon has touched base on this on the Dynamics team, but Viva Sales is a new module that's coming out. And so there's a screenshot of it on the next slide that I'll get into. But basically, with the power of AI, your CRM is going to be integrated with your other applications like Outlook or Teams. And so when you're emailing back and forth with a client, Viva will pop up like, hey, do you want to add this as an account or a contact for an account? And it will try and pull all that data. It'll even add tasks for you to follow up and engage you with customers and whatnot. So it's just making the sales process quicker, engage you and capture tasks and add customers and manage those relationships a little bit easier just across the board with your Microsoft stack. And so whether you're in again, Outlook, Teams, wherever you're gathering and communicating with uh, these customers, Viva will try and pull that for you quicker, so you don't have to go to Dynamics and try and do that all manually. So that's going to be super exciting if you have those licenses for Viva. And then the other module coming out is Viva Goals, and this is awesome for customer engagement and aligning your individual team goals and whatnot to your overarching organizational goals. And so Viva Goals is really a goal setting and management solution. And so there's going to be one centralized place for goal setting, and you can have a bunch of different dashboards to go along with your goals that you can set up. And again, it's going to keep track of your objectives and your different key results. And so in this next slide, you can see the screenshots for Viva Sales and Viva Goals. Again, if you have those licenses for Viva, you should be able to see these soon if you don't already. And so here you can see a dashboard. You can access this via Teams or online on the web interface and access your different dashboards that you can create. And you can see that your different teams dashboards, or excuse me, your goals specific to your teams are specific to your individual teams, and they kind of roll up to the bigger goals that maybe your organization has set. And so that's really awesome for your OKRs and your different project goals and whatnot. We'll wrap this up with some SharePoint and some form updates. So some updates with SharePoint syntax, you can now add taxonomy columns from modern library views. So basically, if you've set up a term store and terms within your organization, which if you haven't, I highly suggest that you do so in your tenant. You can now create columns based off of those terms and term sets really easily, as if you were just adding another column in your library or lists. So this is going to be super helpful for search and organization of your content. And so, moving away from your legacy file structures and folders within folders, definitely move into that taxonomy route and manage metadata. It's going to be a lot easier to do that now. And on that same topic, there's going to be tags available now in your images, so that now you can add or remove different tags, and AI even generates some tags for you on the detail pane of your images. So again, just more features for your content management, specifically your images. And I've touched on this before in Microsoft Teams, but accessing your standard and private channel files within SharePoint and OneDrive will be a lot easier now. It used to be separate and used to be a little bit difficult to navigate between your private channels and your standard channels. And in SharePoint, where is it at in OneDrive? It's going to be from the same view, so it's all going to be consolidated and going to be a lot easier again for managing content. And on that same token, this was released relatively recently, but that SharePoint app bar that's now available on that left side, if you've been on SharePoint at all recently, you've seen that left-hand navigation that's persistent globally. Now you're going to be able to create sites if you have the permissions to do so. You can create files, you can create lists from that SharePoint app bar and kind of specify where you're creating those documents. So now you don't have to be in a specific site or a specific library to create files or lists or site. It's just going to be there the whole time while you're on SharePoint. So again, super helpful and easy for the user and whoever's on SharePoint. Like I mentioned, you're going to be able to delete a large amount of files now. And then just as an update to Microsoft Stream, you're going to be able to add chapters to your uploaded videos. And so if you have a long video or something like a Tech Insider, like we're doing now, you can add chapters of the different sections within your videos and whatnot, and make it easier for users to go to a specific section in a video. And so this next slide just shows a couple of screenshots. This first one is, again, just navigating between your different libraries and your teams and whatnot. And this is the global app bar, or the SharePoint app bar, excuse me, where you can now create sites, files, lists from that global nav. And so if you haven't already done so, I would highly utilize the SharePoint app bar. That way you can utilize and leverage SharePoint as much as you can. And just to touch base on forms, there's a lot of updates on forms. So I'll go over that really quick. And so just some new updates. There's actually just a completely new homepage for forms. And so your homepage for forms, there's going to be several templates that you can choose from now. And so you don't have to create everything from scratch. You can choose from several templates. And there's this really neat feature where you can actually create your forms or your quiz from a Word document or a PDF document. And if you upload that, Forms will analyze it and actually convert that into a forms. And so again, you don't have to create everything from scratch in Forms. If you have a pre-made questionnaire or forms, just go ahead and upload that, and Forms will create an online form for that. So that's really awesome. And now the max response limit is now 5 million. And so I don't know who's reaching that, but maybe you are. But you'll be able to get 5 million responses to any forms or quizzes moving forward. And then Forms is renamed to polls in Teams meetings. And so if you're on Teams, you'll see the Forms logo. It's actually called polls. And so that's where you can create your word cloud and Teams meeting, send live polls during presentations and whatnot. Just look for polls in Teams. And then there's just a last update. There's a new question type of a rating. So that's going to be super helpful for feedback type questionnaires and forms. So you can send that out now that we have a new question type of rating. And so this next slide just shows some of those updates. This first one is that new homepage. So it's almost as if it's its own app. Again, it's tied to whatever 365 group, or if it's been shared with you, you're going to have a new homepage with your templates and all the forms that you have access to. And this is also where you can upload. So this next one is that polls, like I mentioned. If you look for that, that's what it's under. And then this last screenshot is that upload of that Word document into Forms, and Forms creating a poll or a form from that Word or PDF. So that's going to be super helpful, honestly, if you have previously made forms. So that should be released soon if you don't already see it. So that's the updates on SharePoint and Forms.